Called in by an officer on the Joint Staff who told me that, he said, you know, we're going to invade Iraq. I said, but why? And he said, I don't know. He said, I guess because we don't know what else to do. But in fact, the why of it went back a decade to the spring of 1991. It went back to the argument inside the Republican Party about whether or not the Gulf War should have ended with the capture of Baghdad and the overthrow of Saddam Hussein. And in 1991, when I talked to Secretary Wolfowitz, you know, he said, we didn't get rid of Saddam Hussein, and we should have. He said, we've only got 5 or 10 years to clean up the Middle East. These old Soviet surrogate regimes like Syria and Iraq, get rid of them before the next superpower comes along to challenge us. We didn't foresee that we'd actually be using force aggressively to change regimes. And it appeared full-blown after 9/11. And somehow, in the minds of the American people, the attack run by Osama bin Laden, based out of Afghanistan, became part of Saddam Hussein. And to retaliate and make sure that, and it was phrased in many different ways. There was effort in the intelligence community to prove that Saddam Hussein had somehow been connected to the strikes in New York and against the Pentagon. And then there was the idea that, well, but he might have some weapons of mass destruction, biological, chemical, nuclear weapons that he could give to terrorists, despite the fact that Saddam Hussein and al-Qaeda couldn't have been further apart in terms of working together as allies. Now, if you put them under enough pressure, maybe, you know, they would team up against the United States, but we created that pressure against Saddam Hussein for our own reasons. What were those reasons? We've never really heard. There was no single reason. There was, yes, there were some weapons of mass destruction possibly that were still there, but we'd had 10 years for the UN Special Commission. We'd had the strikes, Operation Desert Fox in December of '98, taking out all the sites that we knew about then through intelligence. Maybe there was some unaccounted for scuds that they said had been fired in training. Maybe yes, maybe no. Maybe there was some material that you could, culture material that you could grow bioweapons in, but there wasn't much that I knew of. And so, and I'd been reading all the intelligence until I retired. So I began to see that, and I thought back to the conversation with Wolfowitz, and I thought what I'd been told inside the Pentagon, and I began to smell something that didn't smell right.